Hey everyone, I'm Peter Stories here to guide you today. If you use this video to drift off to sleep, please tap like, hit subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now settle in, get cozy, and let yourself relax. My name is Mason Rodriguez, and I've been a forest ranger at Olympic National Park for 8 years. What I'm about to tell you will sound impossible, but every word is true. Some experiences shatter your understanding of reality so completely that you're never the same person again. October 15th, 2018. 6:47 a.m. I was finishing my morning coffee in the Sol Duke Ranger Station when the call came through static-filled radio speakers. Unit 14, this is dispatch. We have a code yellow. Missing hiker, 19-year-old female, Haley Davidson, last seen yesterday 1400 hours at Deer Lake Trail. Families requesting immediate search and rescue. My hands tightened around the ceramic mug, a Father's Day gift from my daughter Sophia with her handprint painted in blue. The coffee suddenly tasted bitter, metallic. In my gut, that familiar cold twist started forming, the one that always preceded the bad cases. Copy that, dispatch. Unit 14 responding. What's the LKP? I grabbed my gear pack, checking contents by muscle memory. Garmin GPS, emergency beacon, first aid kit, MREs, water purification tablets, headlamp, backup batteries. Last known position GPS coordinates 47.9534 Degon N, 123.6044 W, approximately 2 miles northeast of Deer Lake parking area. Weather conditions deteriorating. Storm front, moving in from the Pacific, temperature dropping to 38 degrees by nightfall. Something was wrong. My intuition, honed by years of wilderness rescue, was screaming danger in frequencies I couldn't identify. The back of my neck prickled with supernatural awareness as I stepped outside into the morning mist. The forest felt different. Olympic's ancient Douglas firs and western red cedars, some over 300 years old, seemed to be watching me with malevolent patience. The usual dawn chorus of Steller's jays and varied thrushes was eerily absent. Only silence pressed against my eardrums like cotton. I texted my wife Carmen. Got a search case, home by dinner, promise, kiss Sophia for me. Her response came immediately. Stay safe, mi amor. Sophia made you lunch, PB&J in your pack, te amo. The photo she sent showed our 7-year-old daughter at the kitchen table, gap-toothed smile bright above a plate of pancakes shaped like Mickey Mouse ears. My chest tightened with fierce protective love. By 8:15 a.m., I was hiking the Deer Lake Trail, boots crunching on frost-stiffened pine needles. The Loa Renegade GTX treads found solid purchase on the familiar terrain, but something fundamental felt wrong about the forest geometry. Trees seemed to lean at impossible angles, shadows fell in directions that defied the sun's position. My radio crackled. Unit 14, this is Unit 23. Mike Peterson here. I'm approaching from the north axis. What's your 20? About half a mile from the coordinates, heading northeast on Main Trail. Mike, you feeling anything off about this place today? Static-filled silence. Then, yeah, actually, dogs won't track. Brought Ranger and Scout, best bloodhounds in the county. Their whining won't leave the truck. Never seen them act like this. The temperature dropped 10 degrees in 30 seconds. My breath started clouding despite the morning sun breaking through the canopy. Goosebumps raised on my forearms under the Ranger Service fleece. At 9:23 a.m. I found Haley Davidson's Patagonia backpack hanging from a Douglas fir branch 8 feet off the ground. No scuff marks on the bark, no sign of climbing equipment. The pack swayed gently in windless air. Dispatch, Unit 14. Found victim's pack. Coordinates 47.9547 N, 123.6031 W. Pack appears to be placed, not dropped. Continuing search pattern, Alpha 7. Inside the backpack, iPhone 8 with 73% battery, showing last text sent at 2:17 p.m. yesterday. Mom, this place is beautiful but feels weird. Call you tonight. Wallet, ID confirming identity, energy bars, water bottle still half full. No signs of struggle. My spine began tingling with supernatural awareness. The forest was holding its breath. Following standard search protocol, I began a grid pattern moving northeast. GPS coordinates steady. Radio check every 15 minutes, careful documentation of terrain and weather. Professional training warred with primal instinct, screaming to run. At 10:45 a.m., I discovered the clearing. It wasn't on any topographical map, satellite imagery, or trail guide. A perfect circle of barren earth roughly 60 feet in diameter, surrounded by ancient cedars whose branches bent away from the space like arthritic fingers recoiling from flame. In the center stood Haley Davidson. She was exactly as described by her family, 5'6", brown hair in a ponytail, wearing North Face hiking boots and a red flannel shirt. She stood motionless, staring at something I couldn't see. "Haley," I called, stepping toward the clearing's edge. "Haley Davidson, I'm Ranger Rodriguez, here to help." She didn't respond, didn't move, didn't blink. I keyed my radio. Unit 14 to dispatch. Subject located. Coordinates 47.9559 D green N, 1223.60 and 18 degree W. Unresponsive but appears uninjured. Requesting immediate medical support. Static. No response. I checked my radio. Full battery, antenna extended, proper frequency. Nothing but electronic snow. GPS showed impossible readings. Coordinates shifting between locations hundreds of miles apart. Elevation readings varying from 500 feet to 14,000 feet. The Garmin screen flickered with symbols that weren't in any manual. My phone showed no signal, but worse, the time kept changing. 10:47 a.m., 3:22 p.m., 11:15 a.m., 7:33 p.m. The date cycled through random days in October, sometimes showing months I'd never heard of. Heart rate spiking to dangerous levels, sweat beating despite the supernatural cold. I approached Haley slowly. Every step into the clearing felt like walking through invisible molasses. "Haley, can you hear me? I'm here to take you home." She turned. Her eyes were completely black, not just the pupils but iris and sclera, reflecting nothing. When she spoke, her voice came from everywhere and nowhere. "Time isn't linear here, Mason Rodriguez. It's a spiral. A feeding spiral." The clearing began to spin. Not visually, the trees stayed stationary, but reality itself rotated around us like a carousel of cosmic horror. Past and future collapsed into a singular point of existential terror. I found myself reliving Haley's experience. October 14th, 2:17 p.m. I was Haley Davidson, hiking alone, phone in hand, typing to Mom. The clearing appeared ahead, beautiful and wrong. Something ancient waited there, hungry for temporal experience. I stepped inside. The loop snapped back to present. I was Mason Rodriguez again, but the cosmic entity inhabiting this space had shown me truth that shattered human comprehension. Time wasn't a river flowing forward. It was a spiral, and this clearing was a feeding node where an intelligence from dimensions beyond our reality consumed temporal experience. It had been here since before human consciousness evolved, gorging itself on the loops of trauma, fear, and death. Haley wasn't trapped. She was bait. The entity had used her image to lure me here. If this story is giving you chills, smash that follow button for more supernatural horror. What would you do in Mason Rodriguez's situation? Comment below. The false Haley smiled with too many teeth that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "Your family loves you very much, Mason. Sophia's pancakes this morning, Carmen's worried texts. Such beautiful temporal experiences to feed upon." Reality fragmented like a broken mirror. I experienced every possible timeline simultaneously. Timeline A. I run screaming from the clearing and spend the rest of my life in psychiatric care. Timeline B. I'm found days later, catatonic, drooling about cosmic entities that steal time. Timeline C. I never leave the clearing, becoming another lure for future victims. Timeline D. I transform into something that isn't human, spreading the temporal infection. But there was one timeline the entity couldn't see, couldn't predict or consume. The timeline where love transcends cosmic indifference. In my pocket, Sophia's drawing from last week, a crayon masterpiece of our family camping trip. In my wallet, the photo from our wedding day, Carmen laughing in her white dress. On my phone, despite the impossible readings, a voicemail from yesterday. Daddy, I love you to the moon and back into all the dimensions. My daughter's innocent words contained more power than this ancient intelligence could comprehend. Love existed outside time, immune to its feeding spirals. I closed my eyes and thought of every moment that mattered. Sophia's first steps, Carmen's hand in mine during her cancer scare 3 years ago, the day I became a ranger to protect places like this for future generations. When I opened them, the entity was screaming, a sound like reality tearing. You cannot escape. Time is my domain. I have fed here for millennia. Time might be your domain, I said, standing straighter than I'd ever stood. But love exists outside time, and that's something you'll never understand. The false Haley began dissolving, revealing the true entity beneath, a writhing mass of temporal probability that hurt to perceive directly. Its form suggested octopus tentacles made of liquid clock faces, eyes that were actually viewing portals into different eras, and a hunger so vast it had consumed civilizations across multiple timelines. But it had made one crucial mistake. It had shown me the real Haley Davidson, trapped in a temporal loop experiencing her worst trauma, the car accident that killed her younger brother 2 years ago. She was reliving that moment infinitely, her guilt and grief feeding the entity. I reached out with my ranger training, my intuitive abilities, and most importantly, with the love that defined my existence. Not romantic love, but the fierce protective love of someone who has dedicated their life to helping others. Haley, you couldn't save him then, but you can save yourself now. The accident wasn't your fault. Her loop shattered. The real Haley Davidson, confused and terrified but alive, stumbled toward me through dimensions that were folding in on themselves. The entity's rage rewrote local reality. Trees aged centuries in seconds, then reversed to saplings. The ground became liquid, then gas, then something that existed in mathematical dimensions beyond human perception. Gravity shifted directions every few seconds, but love remained constant. I grabbed Haley's hand and ran for the clearing's edge. Behind us, cosmic horror beyond description was unraveling the very concept of linear time. My GPS exploded in sparks. My radio melted into aluminum slag. My phone screen showed hieroglyphs from civilizations that wouldn't exist for 1,000,000 years. We reached the tree line as the clearing collapsed into itself, creating a temporal sinkhole that would probably spawn quantum physicists' nightmares for decades. In the sudden silence that followed, my radio crackled back to life. Unit 14, this is dispatch. Respond, please. You've been silent for 3 minutes. 3 minutes. We'd been in that clearing for hours, experiencing multiple timelines, confronting cosmic horror that predated human civilization. 3 minutes. Haley looked at me with wide human eyes. What just happened? Something that shouldn't exist in our reality, I said, helping her stand. But it's over now. We hiked back to the main trail in comfortable silence, both processing experiences that would require years of therapy to fully understand. At the parking area, Haley's family waited. Parents, younger sister, even the brother she thought she'd killed in the accident. He'd been injured, not killed. The guilt had been feeding the entity all along. Their reunion was beautiful enough to heal cosmic wounds. Later, filling out my incident report, I wrote, "Subject located, mild dehydration, no injuries, family reunited." Some truths are too dangerous to document officially, but I know the clearing is still there, waiting. And I know other entities exist beyond our dimensional boundaries, feeding on human experience in ways we can barely comprehend. I also know that love, real, selfless, protective love, is the only force in the universe they fear. That night, I held Carmen close and read Sophia 3 extra bedtime stories. In the morning, there would be other cases, other mysteries, other supernatural encounters. But for now, love was enough to hold the cosmic darkness at bay. Outside our bedroom window, something vast and ancient moved through the Olympic National Forest, searching for new feeding grounds. My intuitive abilities registered its presence like a distant earthquake. Let it search. As long as love exists in this world, some things remain beyond its reach, even when reality itself is nothing more than a fragile spiral, spinning through dimensions we cannot see. Holy hell, that was intense. Did that ending blow your mind? Like if you want more terrifying Ranger stories, follow for daily supernatural horror. And comment your theory about what really happened to Haley Davidson. I read every single one. My name is Ethan Rodriguez, and I've been a forest ranger at Mount Rainier National Park for 6 years. 6 years of my colleagues calling me professor behind my back. 6 years of them rolling their eyes when I quote forestry manuals or correct their plant identification. But when 23-year-old Olivia Parker went missing on the Wonderland Trail during her solo backpacking trip, Chief Hansen called me into his office with a grim expression. "Rodriguez, I need your brain on this one," he said, tapping the incident report dated October 15th, 2018. Parker's been missing for 18 hours. Last GPS ping puts her at coordinates 46.8523 degree N, 121.7603 degree W, near Panhandle Gap. Weather's turning bad. I pulled up the topographical data on my tablet, cross-referencing elevation profiles with recent weather patterns. My wife Elena had kissed me goodbye that morning with our twin daughters clinging to my legs, making me promise I'd be home for Isabella's soccer game at 4 p.m. The drawing Sophia had made of our family was still folded in my breast pocket, next to the photo of them sleeping peacefully last Sunday morning. "Sir, the terrain around Panhandle Gap is notoriously unstable this time of year," I said, adjusting my wire-rimmed glasses. "The geological surveys from 2017 show significant erosion patterns, and with the recent rainfall..." "Cut to the chase, Rodriguez. What do you need?" 20 minutes later, I was hiking the Wonderland Trail with my Motorola XPR 7550 radio crackling with static, my Garmin eTrex GPS unit showing 6.2 miles to Olivia's last known position. My Merrell hiking boots crunched through the carpet of wet maple leaves, their decay mixing with the sharp scent of Douglas fir. The October air bit at my exposed skin, carrying that metallic taste that comes before a storm. The weight of my 35-pound pack pressed against my shoulders as I maintained a steady 2.5 mph pace, exactly what the manual recommended for grid search patterns. Inside my pack, emergency bivouac, first aid kit, 72-hour food supply, water purification tablets, emergency beacon, rope, and the department-issued Streamlight ProTac flashlight that had saved my ass more times than I could count. "Unit 7 to base, I'm at waypoint Charlie 4, no sign of the subject," I radioed, my breath visible in the dropping temperature. "Copy that, Unit 7. Be advised, storm front moving in from the northwest. You've got maybe 2 hours before it hits." That's when I noticed something wrong with my GPS. The coordinates kept shifting. Not dramatically, but enough to make me double-check the unit. 46.8521 degree N, 121.7605 degree W, then 46.8524 degree N, 121.7601 degree W. The numbers danced on the screen like they couldn't make up their minds where I was standing. I stopped, pulling out my compass for a manual bearing check. True north pointed toward what should have been Mount Rainier's summit, but something felt off about the mountain's silhouette against the gray sky. The ridgeline looked different, sharper in some places, softer in others, like someone had taken an eraser to parts of the familiar peaks I'd memorized from 6 years of patrols. My stomach clenched, not from hunger, but from something deeper. That primal unease that evolution had hardwired into every ranger who'd spent enough time in the deep wilderness. The forest was too quiet. No bird calls, no rustle of squirrels, not even the buzz of late-season insects. Just the whisper of wind through branches and the steady drip of moisture from overhead. The trail curved left around a massive boulder, and that's where I found Olivia's first piece of gear. A bright orange stuff sack containing her sleeping bag, torn open and scattered across the undergrowth like confetti. The nylon was shredded in patterns I'd never seen. Not from animals, not from sharp rocks. These tiers were precise, almost geometric, as if something with mathematical intelligence had dissected the fabric. I keyed my radio. "Unit 7 to base. I've got evidence. Orange sleeping bag coordinates I looked at my GPS again. The numbers had changed completely. Base, I'm having technical difficulties with my positioning system. Unit 7, repeat your last. Before I could respond, the ground beneath my feet shifted. Not an earthquake. I'd felt those before. This was different. Subtle. Like the earth itself was breathing. The trees around me swayed without wind, their roots creaking underground with sounds that made my teeth ache. I bent down to collect samples of the destroyed sleeping bag, my latex gloves snapping as I stretched them on. The fabric felt wrong between my fingers, too smooth in some places, too rough in others, as if it had been exposed to acid on one side and sandpaper on the other. When I held a piece up to the fading daylight, I could see microscopic crystals embedded in the material, glittering like ground glass. My heart rate spiked from its normal resting 65 BPM to what felt like 90. Sweat beaded on my forehead despite the cold, and I could taste the metallic tang of adrenaline flooding my system. Every textbook I'd ever read, every forestry course I'd taken, every scientific principle I'd memorized, none of it explained what I was seeing. The mountain groaned, not the normal settling sounds of rock and ice that every ranger learns to identify. This was organic, alive, like the entire geological mass of Mount Rainier had just taken a breath and found something lodged in its throat. I looked up at the peak, and my vision narrowed to a tunnel. The summit was moving, not dramatically, just enough to make me question my sanity. The snow line shifted, rock faces changed angle, and ridges that had been there moments before simply weren't. My hands started shaking as I fumbled for my radio. Base, this is Unit 7. I need to report unusual geological activity at my location. The mountain appears to be... The radio crackled with static, then went dead. Complete silence except for the sound of my own ragged breathing and the impossible whisper of stone grinding against stone high above. That's when I realized the truth that would haunt me forever. Olivia Parker hadn't gone missing on Mount Rainier. Mount Rainier had taken her. Der Berserknakte 2. The mountain awakens. The temperature dropped 15 degrees in as many minutes. I could feel it through my layered clothing. The merino wool base layer, fleece mid-layer, and Gore-Tex shell that should have kept me comfortable down to 20-degree orders. But this cold was different. It seeped through fabric and skin, settling into my bones with the weight of geological time. I forced myself to think like the scientist my colleagues always mocked. Hypothesis: extreme weather causing hallucinations. Test: check all equipment, maintain detailed observations, stick to search protocols. The missing person case came first. Olivia Parker was out here somewhere, probably scared, cold, maybe injured. Her parents had called the station every hour since she'd failed to check in, their voices growing more desperate with each conversation. Following the scattered remnants of her gear, I pushed deeper into terrain that felt increasingly wrong. My Garmin showed I was still on the Wonderland Trail, but the path beneath my boots was narrower than it should be, rockier, with switchbacks I didn't remember from previous patrols. The familiar Douglas firs gave way to trees I couldn't identify, their bark too smooth, their needles the wrong shade of green, their branches reaching toward the sky at angles that hurt to look at. Every few hundred yards I found more of Olivia's equipment, a titanium spork bent into impossible spirals, her water filter crushed and reformed into geometric shapes, pieces of her backpack fused with granite as if the rock had briefly turned molten before solidifying again. Each discovery made my pulse hammer harder against my eardrums. The silence was total now. Even my footsteps seemed muffled, as if the air itself had thickened. I stopped to check my altimeter. 7,200 feet. That was wrong. Panhandle Gap sat at 6,800 feet, and I'd been hiking downhill for the past mile. The numbers made no sense unless the mountain was changing its elevation beneath my feet. I pulled out my emergency backup compass, hoping for different results. The needle spun wildly before settling on a bearing that put magnetic north somewhere near what should have been southeast. I was officially lost on a trail I'd hiked dozens of times, carrying topographical maps that no longer matched the terrain around me. That's when I heard Olivia screaming. Her voice cut through the unnatural silence like a blade, raw with terror and pain. The sound came from everywhere and nowhere, echoing off rock faces that kept shifting in my peripheral vision, bouncing between valleys that hadn't existed an hour ago. "Help me, please! It's inside the mountain!" I ran toward the sound, my 35-pound pack bouncing against my spine, branches whipping across my face hard enough to draw blood. My boots slipped on loose scree that clattered down slopes into darkness. The screaming continued, always just ahead, always just around the next bend, leading me deeper into terrain that defied every geological principle I'd ever learned. The trees began to bleed. I noticed it first as a dark stain on a massive cedar's trunk, thick, viscous fluid that reflected the dim light with an oily sheen. Then I saw it on other trees, spreading like infection through the bark, pooling at their roots in puddles that steamed in the cold air. The smell hit me next, copper and decay like old pennies mixed with roadkill left too long in summer heat. My stomach lurched, bile rising in my throat. I'd seen plenty of natural phenomena in 6 years as a ranger: sap bleeding, bacterial infections, even the occasional lightning-struck tree oozing resin. This wasn't natural. The fluid moved too deliberately, following patterns that looked almost like script written in a language I didn't recognize. "Unit 7 to any station. Emergency assistance requested." I gasped into my dead radio, knowing it was futile but needing to try. "I have eyes on..." Jesus Christ. I don't know what I have eyes on. The screaming stopped abruptly, leaving a silence so complete it felt like being buried alive. I stood frozen, every nerve ending firing, sweat mixing with the blood on my scratched face. My heart hammered at what felt like 130 BPM, each beat visible as a red pulse at the edges of my vision. Then I saw her. Olivia Parker stood 50 yards ahead on what should have been the trail, but her positioning was all wrong. She was embedded in the rock face, her body pressed into granite as if the stone had temporarily liquefied around her before hardening again. Only her head and shoulders were visible, her blonde hair matted with something that looked like crushed minerals, her eyes wide with terror and something else. Recognition. She was looking directly at me. "Ethan," she said, and her voice carried impossible distances in the thin air. "It knows you're here now. It knows your name." That was impossible. I'd never met Olivia Parker. Her missing person report contained no indication she knew any park rangers personally. Yet she spoke my name with certainty, her lips barely moving, her voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate from the mountain itself. I approached slowly, fighting every instinct that screamed at me to run. My scientific mind cataloged details. Her skin had a grayish tint that matched the granite around her. Small crystal formations grew from her temples like horns, and her breathing was too slow. Maybe 4 breaths per minute instead of the normal 12 to 16. "Olivia? Olivia Parker? I'm Ranger Rodriguez. We're here to help you." Her laugh was the sound of rock slides. "Help? You think you understand what help means? The mountain is alive, Ethan. It's been alive for thousands of years and it's hungry. So hungry. If this story is giving you chills, smash that follow button for more supernatural horror. What would you do in Ethan Rodriguez's situation? Comment below. The rock around her began to pulse with a rhythm that matched my terrified heartbeat. Veins of some phosphorescent mineral spread outward from her body like a circulatory system, carrying light deeper into the mountain. As I watched in horror, more of her disappeared into the stone, her shoulders, then her collarbone, the rock flowing like thick honey around her disappearing form. "The others tried to save me too," she whispered as the granite closed over her mouth. "They're all here now, all of us together, forever feeding it what it needs. You'll understand soon." The rock sealed over her completely, leaving only a vaguely human-shaped impression in the stone that might have been a trick of shadows if I hadn't just witnessed it happen. I reached out with trembling fingers to touch the surface where she'd been, and the granite was warm, pulsing with internal heat like living flesh. That's when the mountain began to move in earnest. Not subtle shifts now, massive, undeniable restructuring of the landscape around me. Rock faces twisted, trail switchbacks straightened into impossible vertical climbs. Valleys opened beneath my feet with the grinding roar of geological violence. I was trapped inside a living entity that was rearranging itself to digest me like Olivia Parker, like the others she'd mentioned. My scientific mind finally broke under the weight of impossible reality. Whatever this was, it existed beyond the boundaries of any natural phenomenon I could comprehend. The mountain wasn't just alive, it was intelligent, hungry, and it had been collecting people for longer than I wanted to imagine. As the landscape churned around me, reshaping itself into configurations that violated every law of physics, I thought of Elena and the girls, my promise to be home for Isabella's soccer game, the drawing in my pocket of our family, stick figures holding hands under a bright yellow sun. I'd never see them again unless I found a way to fight something that shouldn't exist. The mountain read my thoughts and laughed with the voice of avalanches. Act 3. The Harvest. The landscape settled into its new configuration with sounds like breaking bones. Where the familiar Wonderland Trail had been, I now faced a vertical maze of stone passages that seemed to extend infinitely upward and downward, lit by that same phosphorescent veining I'd seen around Olivia's embedded body. The air tasted of copper and ozone, thick enough to chew, carrying whispers in languages that predated human speech. I checked my watch. 2:17 p.m. Isabella's soccer game started in less than 2 hours, but time had become as fluid as the living rock around me. My phone showed no signal, no GPS, just a blank screen that occasionally flickered with images I didn't want to examine too closely. Glimpses of other people trapped in stone, their faces pressed against transparent crystal formations like insects in amber. The passage I chose led deeper into the mountain's digestive system, because that's what this was. I could no longer deny the biological reality of what was happening. The walls pulsed with rhythmic contractions, forcing me forward through increasingly narrow spaces that opened and closed behind me like sphincter muscles. The phosphorescent veins carried not just light but movement, flowing substances that looked disturbingly like blood mixed with ground minerals. My headlamp, a Streamlight ProTac rated for 350 lumens, barely penetrated the supernatural darkness ahead. The beam seemed to bend and scatter as if the air itself was infected with something that absorbed photons. I could hear them before I could see them, voices calling from within the walls, people who'd been harvested by the mountain over years, decades, maybe centuries. New blood. Someone whispered from inside the stone to my left. I pressed my gloved hand against the rock and felt warmth, felt movement, felt the outline of a face pushing against the granite from within. "How long?" I asked, not really expecting an answer I could handle. "Time moves differently here," the voice replied, definitely male, maybe middle-aged. "I've been watching the seasons change through mineral eyes. My wife, she remarried. Good for her. My kids grew up. They're adults now. I've been here 17 years, Ranger. 17 years feeding this thing with my thoughts, my memories, my life force." I stumbled backward, bile burning my throat. Jesus Christ. How many? Hundreds, maybe thousands. We're all still conscious, all still aware. It keeps us alive to maximize the harvest. Fear tastes better when it's fresh, when it never stops. The voice grew fainter as I moved away from that section of wall. "Find the heart, Ranger. If you can find the heart." The passage opened into a vast cavern that hadn't existed in any geological survey of Mount Rainier. The space was impossibly large, cathedral-sized, with formations that looked more grown than carved. Stalactites and stalagmites twisted together in helical patterns that reminded me of DNA strands, all of it pulsing with that organic light. The smell was overwhelming now, decomposition and birth happening simultaneously, the scent of a charnel house mixed with a maternity ward. And there, suspended in the center of the cavern like the nucleus of a cell, was the heart. It was massive, at least 20 feet in diameter, translucent enough that I could see its internal structure, chambers that contracted and expanded with deliberate rhythm, valves that opened and closed with wet sounds that echoed through the cavern and throughout its tissue. Faces. Hundreds of faces pressed against the membrane from within, their mouths open in silent screams, their eyes tracking my movement as I approached. Olivia Parker was there, her face already beginning to merge with the others in a grotesque composite of human features. She mouthed words I couldn't hear but somehow understood. "Kill it, while you still can." The heart's rhythm synchronized with my own pulse, drawing the blood from my extremities, making my vision tunnel. I could feel it trying to connect with me, to establish the same biological link it had formed with its other victims. My fingertips began to tingle, then burn, as microscopic crystal formations tried to burrow through my skin. This was how it happened. Gradual integration. The mountain would slowly convert my organic tissue into its own hybrid material, keeping my consciousness intact to feed on my terror, while my body became part of its larger organism. I would remain aware through every moment of the transformation, feeling my bones become stone, my blood become mineral solution, my thoughts become part of its collective hunger. My scientific background finally proved useful in a way no textbook had prepared me for. If this entity was truly biological, it would have vulnerabilities, pressure points, dependencies. The heart was obviously central to its function, but destroying something that size with my limited equipment seemed impossible. Then I remembered the emergency flare in my pack. Magnesium burns at 3,100 degree Lyco, hot enough to cut through steel, definitely hot enough to cauterize living tissue. I had 3 road flares in my emergency kit, designed for signaling helicopters but potentially useful for more aggressive applications. The only question was whether I could get close enough to the heart without being absorbed into the mountain's digestive system. The crystal formations on my hands were spreading, creating geometric patterns under my skin that pulsed with the same rhythm as the heart. Pain like I'd never experienced radiated up my arms as my nervous system was slowly rewired to interface with the mountain's consciousness. I could feel its alien thoughts beginning to merge with mine. Hunger that spanned geological time, satisfaction at trapping new prey, anticipation of the feast to come. But stronger than the mountain's hunger was my love for Elena and the girls. The memory of Isabella's laugh when I pushed her on the swing set. The way Sophia had fallen asleep against my chest last Sunday while we watched cartoons. Elena's smile when I brought her coffee in bed, still warm and perfect after 10 years of marriage. That love burned hotter than magnesium. I pulled out the first flare, my crystallized fingers struggling with the familiar motion of striking it to life. The red flame blazed in the supernatural darkness, casting dancing shadows on the cavern walls that revealed even more faces trapped in the stone. Men, women, children who'd wandered into the mountain's influence over decades of disappearances. The heart reacted immediately, its rhythm spiking to dangerous levels, the faces within it pressing harder against the membrane as if trying to escape. The mountain shuddered around me, loose stone falling from the ceiling as the entire organism recoiled from the chemical fire in my hand. I ran toward the heart, feeling the crystal infection spreading up my arms and into my chest, threatening to reach my brain before I could complete my mission. Each step sent agony through my transforming legs as bone began to fuse with imported minerals. But Elena's face in my memory gave me strength, and Isabella's voice calling, "Daddy, watch me," pushed me forward when everything else failed. The mountain screamed with the voices of avalanches as I drove the flare directly into the heart's membrane. Act 4. The Awakening. The membrane ruptured like a burst balloon, spraying phosphorescent fluid across the cavern floor. The stench was indescribable. Every corpse that had ever rotted mixed with the metallic tang of fresh blood and something else, something alien that made my eyes water and my throat close up. The faces trapped within the heart's tissue suddenly animate as the pressure released, their mouths opening in gasps that sounded like wind through cemetery trees. But the creature wasn't dead. If anything, my attack had only wounded it, made it angry. The cavern began collapsing around me, not from structural failure but from deliberate muscular contraction. The mountain was trying to crush me, to grind my bones to powder before I could inflict any more damage. Rock fell in calculated patterns designed to pin me in place while the crystal infection completed its work on my nervous system. I could feel my thoughts beginning to fragment, my individual consciousness starting to merge with the collective intelligence trapped in the stone. Memories that weren't mine flooded my mind. Decades of trapped victims experiencing their transformations, their slow integration into the mountain's digestive process. I saw through Olivia Parker's eyes as she realized what was happening to her, felt her terror as the rock began to flow around her like liquid cement. But I also felt something else. The memories of every person the mountain had consumed, their love, their connections to the outside world, their desperate desire to return to families who were still waiting for them. A chorus of human will that had never been fully extinguished despite years of imprisonment. The crystal infection reached my heart, and I should have died. Instead, something impossible happened. My love for Elena and the girls, that burning absolute devotion that had carried me through 6 years of dangerous work, created some kind of resonance with the collective will of the trapped souls. The mountain had spent decades feeding on fear and despair, but love was something it couldn't digest, couldn't process, couldn't integrate into its alien consciousness. The crystals in my bloodstream began to glow with a different light, warmer than the phosphorescent veining in the walls. I could feel the infection reversing, my human tissue rejecting the mountain's attempt at integration. Not just in me, but in all of us. The faces in the walls were becoming more distinct, more alive, as if the collective power of human love was stronger than the creature's ability to contain it. "Together," whispered the voice I'd heard earlier, the man trapped for 17 years. "All of us together, while it's weakened." I pulled out my second flare, then my third, lighting them simultaneously and hurling them at different sections of the damaged heart. The phosphorescent fluid ignited like napalm, filling the cavern with chemical fire that burned through the creature's tissue with surgical precision. The mountain's screams shifted frequency, becoming less like geological noise and more like the death cries of something that had never expected to die. The stone around me began to crack, not from structural collapse but from the pressure of hundreds of trapped souls pushing outward at the same time. Hands emerged from the rock, human hands, flesh and blood hands, reaching for freedom they hadn't felt in decades. The phosphorescent veining went dark section by section as the mountain's circulatory system failed, its alien blood cooling and crystallizing into inert minerals. Olivia Parker tumbled from a crack in the wall, gasping and whole, the crystal formations on her skin crumbling away like discarded shells. Others followed. The man who'd been trapped for 17 years, his hair white but his body intact. A teenage girl who disappeared in the 1980s according to her faded clothing. Dozens of missing persons from across multiple decades, all of them emerging from their stone prisons as the mountain's hold on reality finally broke. The creature made one final attempt to contain us, the cavern walls flowing like water as it tried to reform around our escape. But the collective will of so many human souls, powered by love and the desperate desire for reunion with families still waiting, was too strong for its weakened state to overcome. The stone cracked, crumbled, and finally opened to reveal gray October sky and the blessed sight of clouds moving normally overhead. I stumbled out of what had been a solid rock face moments before, carrying Olivia Parker while dozens of other survivors streamed around us. My radio crackled to life, real radio signals from the real world, cutting through supernatural interference that no longer had the power to block our communications. Unit 7 to base, this is Rodriguez. I have multiple survivors. Coordinates. I looked at my GPS, laughing with relief as it showed steady, normal readings. 46.85 23 degree N, 121. 7603 degree OW, Panhandle Gap. Request immediate medical evacuation for approximately 30 individuals. Unit 7, did you say 30? Confirm 30 survivors. Confirmed base, 30 plus survivors, various states of exposure and dehydration but alive, all alive. Behind us, Mount Rainier settled back into its familiar outline against the sky. Normal geology, normal elevation, normal, beautiful, non-sentient rock formed by volcanic activity and shaped by millions of years of erosion. The living mountain was dead, its alien consciousness scattered to whatever dimension had spawned it, leaving only stone and ice and the wind through Douglas fir branches. I called Elena from the helicopter, watching the landscape scroll beneath us as we flew toward Harborview Medical Center. The phone rang twice before she answered. "Ethan? How did the search go? Are you going to make Isabella's game? I looked at my watch, 3:47 p.m. Somehow, despite everything that had happened, despite the hours I'd spent inside a living mountain fighting for my life and the lives of 30 other people, I was going to make it home in time. Yeah, honey, I'm coming home. I'll be there. The mountain had taught me something no forestry textbook could. Love really is the most powerful force in the universe, strong enough to resurrect the dead, to break supernatural prisons, to bring families back together across decades of separation. But it had also taught me to never again dismiss the old stories, the legends the senior rangers whispered around campfires. The wilderness holds secrets that science isn't equipped to handle, and sometimes the only thing standing between civilization and those ancient hungers is a forest ranger with a flare gun and an absolute refusal to abandon hope. I made it to Isabella's soccer game with 2 minutes to spare, still wearing my torn uniform, still tasting copper and ozone. Elena asked about the scratches on my face, and I told her I'd had to bushwhack through some rough terrain. It wasn't technically a lie. Olivia Parker hugged her parents in the hospital while news crews tried to make sense of how 30 missing persons from across 5 decades had all been found alive and relatively healthy in the same location. The official report attributed their survival to a previously unknown cave system that had provided shelter, though it couldn't explain how people who'd been missing since the 1970s hadn't aged appropriately. I never told the complete truth about what happened on Mount Rainier. Who would believe it? Instead, I wrote detailed reports about unusual geological instability in the Panhandle Gap area and recommended it be temporarily closed to civilian traffic while the Park Service conducted further studies. But sometimes, when I'm tucking Isabella and Sophia into bed, they ask me to tell them about the mountain adventure, and I do, editing it into a story about a brave ranger who saved a lost hiker and brought her home safely to her family. Because that's what love does. It brings us home. Holy hell, that was intense. Did that ending blow your mind? Like, if you want more terrifying ranger stories, follow for daily supernatural horror and comment your theory about what really happened to Olivia Parker. I read every single one. My name is Connor Davis, and I've been a forest ranger at Olympic National Park for 15 years. I've pulled bodies from ravines, tracked down lost hikers in blizzards, and faced down aggressive black bears with nothing but a can of pepper spray and sheer determination. I thought I'd seen everything these ancient Washington forests could throw at me. I was wrong. Dead fucking wrong. The call came in at 06:30 hours on October 23rd, 2019. My wife Sarah was still asleep. Her auburn hair spread across the pillow like autumn leaves. 8-year-old Emma had crawled into our bed sometime during the night, her small hand clutching my old ranger badge she'd taken to carrying around like a talisman. Daddy's superhero badge, she called it. I kissed them both gently, inhaling the familiar scent of Sarah's vanilla shampoo and Emma's strawberry conditioner. I'll be home for dinner, I whispered against Sarah's temple. The same promise I'd made every morning for the past 8 years since Emma was born. Won't miss Emma's soccer game tomorrow, I swear. The weight of my duty belt settled familiar around my waist. Motorola APX 6000 radio, Garmin GPS 64ST first aid kit, emergency beacon, and my father's old buck knife he'd carried during his own 20-year career with the Forest Service. In my chest pocket, Emma's latest crayon drawing of our family as stick figures with huge smiles, and a photo from last week's breakfast where Sarah had flour in her hair from making pancakes, and Emma was missing her 2 front teeth. Dispatch crackled through my truck's radio as I pulled out of our driveway in Forks. Unit 23, we have a code yellow, missing hiker, last known position grid 47Q05823456. Victim is Jessica Turner, female, age 22. Overdue from solo overnight hike. Family reported her missing 500 hours. Unit 23, copy that. En route to LKP, ETA 23 minutes, I responded, already calculating the search grid in my head. Grid 47Q put her deep in the Hoh River drainage, old growth territory where the Douglas firs grew so thick they blocked out the sun even at midday. Tricky terrain, but Nothing I hadn't handled 100 times before. The Turner family was waiting at the Hoh River Visitor Center when I arrived, their Honda Pilot still warm from the 3-hour drive from Seattle. Jessica's mother, Patricia, clutched a thermos of coffee with shaking hands, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. Her father, David, paced the parking lot while talking rapidly into his iPhone, probably calling every contact he had in law enforcement. "Ranger Davis?" Patricia approached me with desperate hope. "Please, Jessica is... She's everything to us, our only child. She's studying environmental science at UW. She knows these forests. She wouldn't just get lost." I knelt to Patricia's eye level, using my 15 years of experience to project calm confidence I'd learned families needed to see. "Mrs. Turner, I've been working these woods since 2004. I know every trail, every creek, every game path between here and the coast. We're going to find Jessica and bring her home." The lie came so easily after all these years. The truth was, Olympic National Park covered nearly 1 million acres of some of the most rugged wilderness in the continental United States. People disappeared here. Sometimes we found them. Sometimes we didn't. Jessica's last known position was mile 7.3 of the Hoh River Trail, where she'd sent a selfie to her Instagram at 18:47 hours the previous day. The photo showed her grinning beside her orange North Face tent, the late October sun filtering through the ancient forest canopy behind her. Her GPS tracker had gone silent at 2156 hours, which could mean anything from dead batteries to electronic failure to other things I didn't mention to worried families. I hiked in alone, as was protocol for the initial reconnaissance. My Merrill hiking boots found their familiar rhythm against the well-worn trail, my 45-pound search pack settling into the comfortable weight distribution I'd fine-tuned over thousands of miles. The morning air carried the rich scent of decomposing cedar, and the distant sound of the Hoh River rushing over granite boulders worn smooth by millennia of current. The forest felt wrong from the moment I crossed the 3-mile marker. It wasn't anything I could put my finger on at first. The Douglas firs and western hemlocks looked the same, towering 200 feet above the forest floor, like the cathedral pillars they'd always been. The trail switchbacked through the familiar landscape of moss-covered fallen logs and massive root systems that had been growing since before Columbus reached America. But something in the air tasted metallic, like the moments before a lightning strike. My radio crackled with static. "Unit 23, report your position." "Unit 23, at mile 4.2, proceeding to LKP. Forest conditions normal, visibility good, temperature 47 degrees. But even as I spoke the words, sweat beaded on my forehead despite the cool October air. My heart rate kicked up from its normal hiking rhythm of 120 BPM to something closer to 140. No reason for it. No logical reason at all. At mile 6.8, I found the first sign. Jessica's camp was still there, her bright orange tent pitched properly in a level clearing 20 yards off the trail, exactly as forest regulations required. Her gear was meticulously organized, a habit I recognized from years of encountering experienced hikers. MSR Whisper Light stove, Osprey 65-liter pack, Katahdin water filter, all the right equipment for a solo overnight trip. But her sleeping bag was unzipped and empty, and a thin layer of ash covered everything like gray snow. Ash, in a forest that hadn't seen wildfire in over 30 years. I keyed my radio. Unit 23 to dispatch. Located victim's campsite at coordinates 47 degree 4812. Cursor 23 to 5245.1 W. Camper not present, investigating further. Copy Unit 23. Any signs of struggle or animal activity? I examined the ground around the tent with my LED mag light, looking for the telltale signs I'd been trained to recognize. Boot prints, disturbed vegetation, blood, torn fabric, bear scat, cougar scratch marks on nearby trees. Nothing. The forest floor looked undisturbed except for that impossible ash dusting everything like fine gray powder. Negative on struggle or animal signs. Stand by for further report. I followed what looked like a faint path leading west from Jessica's campsite, deeper into the old growth where tourists rarely ventured. My GPS showed I was heading toward an unnamed drainage that wasn't marked on any official trail map. But old-timers sometimes mentioned a place they called Burnout Creek, supposedly the site of a mysterious fire decades ago that had burned in a perfect circle, leaving everything outside the circle completely untouched. Local legend bullshit, I'd always figured. Every forest had its ghost stories. The path, if it could be called that, wound through increasingly dense timber where the canopy blocked so much light that my eyes struggled to adjust. Ancient cedar stumps, some wide enough to park a car on, dotted the landscape like tombstones. The silence was absolute. No bird calls, no squirrel chatter, no insect buzz. Even the distant sound of the Ho River had faded to nothing. My iPhone showed no signal, which was normal this deep in the forest, but my radio had begun picking up strange interference. Instead of the usual clean static, it emitted a low humming sound that seemed to resonate in my chest cavity. I tried raising dispatch. Unit 23 to base, radio check. The humming grew louder, and underneath it I could swear I heard something that sounded like whispers. Words I couldn't quite make out, in a language that didn't sound quite human. Unit 23, this is dispatch. You're breaking up. Repeat your last transmission. I was about to respond when I smelled smoke. Not the familiar scent of a campfire or forest fire, but something else. Something that made my stomach clench with primal unease. It smelled like burning metal, burning electricity, burning something that was never meant to burn. Through the trees ahead, I saw a flickering orange glow. Every instinct I'd developed in 15 years of forest ranger work screamed at me to call for backup, to retreat, to follow protocol. But Jessica Turner was out here somewhere, and her parents were waiting at the visitor center with hope dying a little more each hour. I'd made a promise to bring her home. I drew my father's buck knife and moved toward the light. The glow led me to a perfectly circular clearing I'd never seen before, despite having hiked every trail in this section of the park for over a decade. In the center of the clearing, a fire burned without fuel. No logs, no kindling, no gas source. Just flames dancing 3 feet high in the air above bare earth, casting impossible shadows that moved independently of the fire itself. The flames were beautiful, mesmerizing. They shifted through colors that had no names, deeper than blue, brighter than yellow, more alive than any fire I'd ever seen. Looking at them, I felt a strange peace wash over me, as if all my worries and responsibilities were being lifted from my shoulders. Sarah's concerns about our mortgage, Emma's nightmares about monsters under her bed, my own fears about getting older, slowing down, eventually being unable to protect the people I loved. All of it seemed distant and unimportant compared to the dancing beauty of those flames. I stepped into the clearing. The moment my boot crossed into the circle, the temperature dropped 20 degrees. My breath misted in the suddenly frigid air, and frost began forming on the shoulders of my uniform shirt. But the cold felt good, cleansing, like diving into a mountain lake after a long, hot hike. "Jessica," I called out. My voice echoed strangely in the clearing as if the sound was being stretched and distorted. "Jessica Turner, this is Ranger Davis. If you can hear me, please respond." The fire pulsed brighter, and within the flames I saw her. Jessica Turner sat cross-legged in the center of the impossible fire, completely unharmed. Her hiking clothes were intact, her long brown hair falling over her shoulders exactly as it had in the selfie her parents showed me. She looked peaceful, content. Her eyes reflected the firelight like mirrors. "Jessica!" I rushed toward the flames but stopped when she held up one hand. "Don't," she said, her voice carrying clearly despite the crackling of the fire around her. "It doesn't work that way. I'm here to help you. Your parents are worried sick. We need to get you out of here." Jessica smiled, and for a moment she looked exactly like Emma when my daughter was trying to explain something adults were too stupid to understand. "You can't get out, Ranger Davis. None of us can. We're part of it now." That's when I noticed the others. Shapes moved within the flames behind Jessica. Human forms that flickered in and out of visibility like heat mirages. A man in an old-style forest ranger uniform, his badge tarnished with age. A woman in hiking boots and flannel that looked like fashion from the 1980s. A child, maybe 10 years old, wearing a Boy Scout uniform. All of them had the same peaceful expression as Jessica, All of them had the same mirror-bright eyes. "How long have you been here?" I asked, though part of me already knew I didn't want the answer. "Time doesn't work the same way in the fire," Jessica said. "I've been here minutes. I've been here years. I've been here since before I was born." My radio crackled. "Unit 23, report your status. We're showing your GPS signal has been stationary for over 30 minutes. I looked down at my radio, then back at Jessica. "I have to call this in. Search and rescue will..." "They won't find this place," she interrupted. "The fire only shows itself to certain people who are meant to join us." The flames seemed to pulse in rhythm with my heartbeat, or maybe my heartbeat was sinking to match the flames. Either way, the sensation was oddly comforting, like being rocked to sleep by a loving parent. If this story is giving you chills, smash that follow button for more supernatural horror. What would you do in Connor Davis's situation? Comment below. "What do you mean, meant to join?" I asked, though the words felt thick and strange in my mouth. The metallic taste was stronger now, and my vision had begun to blur at the edges. Jessica's expression grew sad. The fire feeds on what makes us human, our memories, our connections, our love. But it gives something back, too. Peace. An end to all the pain and worry and responsibility. She gestured to the other figures in the flames. Martin there was the ranger who first found this place, back in 1962. He came looking for a lost Boy Scout troop. Found them, but couldn't bring himself to leave them behind. The old ranger nodded at me with a kind smile. Susan came in 1987. She was hiking alone after her divorce, trying to figure out how to rebuild her life. The fire showed her she didn't need to. The woman in flannel waved. And little Tommy, he was part of that Boy Scout troop. He's been here the longest, but he doesn't mind. Time doesn't hurt when you're in the fire. I tried to key my radio, but my fingers felt numb and clumsy. The device slipped from my hand and hit the ground with a distant thud that seemed to come from very far away. "My family," I managed to say. "My wife and daughter. They're waiting for me." "The fire knows about them," Jessica said gently. "It's already shown me your memories. Sarah making pancakes on Sunday mornings. Emma losing her teeth. The way you kiss them goodbye every morning, promising to come home for dinner." The flames danced higher, and within them, I could see my own memories playing out like home movies. Sarah in her wedding dress, radiant with joy. Emma taking her first steps in our living room. Family camping trips where we'd roasted marshmallows and told ghost stories that seemed hilarious in hindsight. But the memories felt distant now, like they belonged to someone else. "The fire will take care of them," Jessica continued. "It always does. The families forget eventually. The pain fades. It's a kindness, really." I tried to remember why that should horrify me, but the emotion felt slippery, hard to hold on to. My duty belt had become incredibly heavy. My radio, my GPS, my first aid kit, my father's knife. All of it dragged at me like anchors, trying to pull me down into some dark place I no longer wanted to visit. "Let it go," Jessica whispered. "Let all of it go." I unbuckled my duty belt and let it fall to the ground. Immediately I felt lighter. The crushing weight of responsibility I'd carried for 15 years, for every lost hiker, every family I'd faced with bad news, every promise I'd made to come home safe. All of it lifted away like smoke. The fire was so beautiful, so warm, so welcoming. I took another step forward. The flames reached out to embrace me, and I could feel their heat penetrating not just my body, but something deeper. They were burning away my worries, my fears, my guilt over every person I'd failed to save over the years. Soon there would be nothing left but peace. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Text message. Without thinking, I pulled it out and looked at the screen. A photo from Sarah. Emma at breakfast that morning, syrup on her cheek, holding up my ranger badge with a huge, gap-toothed grin. The message read, "Someone wants Daddy to stay safe today. We love you so much. Come home to us." The sight of Emma's face hit me like ice water. This wasn't peace. This was theft. The fire wasn't offering me freedom from responsibility. It was trying to steal everything that made my life worth living. My love for Sarah and Emma, my pride in protecting these forests, my commitment to bringing lost people home to their families. The fire wanted to consume all of it, leaving behind an empty shell that felt peaceful only because it felt nothing at all. Jessica's parents were waiting at the visitor center. They deserved to know what happened to their daughter, deserved the chance to grieve properly instead of being erased by supernatural mercy. I stumbled backward, away from the flames. "No," I said, my voice stronger than I'd expected. "No, this isn't right." Jessica's expression turned pleading. "Connor, please. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. The fire only burns what hurts you. Let it burn away the pain. The pain is what makes it matter," I shouted, surprised by my own vehemence. "The worry, the responsibility, the fear of failing the people I love, that's not a burden to be burned away. That's what makes me human." I pulled out Emma's drawing, now crumpled from being in my pocket. A stick figure family with huge smiles. Daddy, Mommy, and Emma holding hands under a crayon sun. "This is what matters," I said, holding up the drawing. "Not the absence of pain, but the presence of love. And love requires choice. It requires sacrifice. It requires accepting responsibility even when it's hard." The fire roared higher, angry now. The peaceful expressions on the faces within the flames twisted into something desperate, hungry. Jessica's eyes were no longer mirrors reflecting firelight. They were burning coals, empty of everything that had once made her human. "You can't leave," she said, her voice no longer her own, but a chorus of all the voices the fire had consumed. "We're part of you now. We know your fears, your failures, your secret guilt over every person you couldn't save. We know about the Martinez family 3 years ago when you found their son too late. We know about the elderly couple last winter, when the weather closed in too fast. We know how you lie awake at night wondering if you could have searched harder, moved faster, made different choices." The words hit like physical blows. Every failure, every moment of self-doubt I'd tried to push down over the years, all thrown back at me at once. "We can burn all of that away," the Jessica thing continued. "All the guilt, all the pain, all the weight of carrying other people's hopes. Wouldn't that be better? Wouldn't that be easier?" For a moment, I almost believed it. The fire showed me a vision of myself without the burden of all those failures. Connor Davis, the ranger who never doubted himself, never lay awake wondering if he could have done more. It would be so easy to step forward, to let the flames consume everything that hurt. But then I thought of Emma at her soccer game tomorrow, looking for me in the stands. Sarah at the dinner table tonight checking her phone when I didn't come through the door at 6. The Turner family at the visitor center, watching the parking lot for my truck to return with good news. I couldn't give them peace by abandoning them. I could only give them the truth. I turned my back on the fire and ran. The forest seemed to shift around me as I fled, trails appearing and disappearing like a maze designed to keep me trapped. Trees I'd passed on the way in were no longer there, replaced by massive cedars that definitely hadn't been growing in this drainage 20 minutes ago. My GPS spun wildly, showing coordinates that placed me simultaneously in Olympic National Park, the middle of the Pacific Ocean, and somehow 3 miles underground. But I kept running, Emma's drawing clutched in my fist, using my love for my family as a compass when all other navigation failed. Behind me, I could hear the fire giving chase, not burning through the forest like a normal wildfire, but moving with predatory intelligence, herding me toward dead ends and cliff faces where it could corner me. I smelled that metallic burning scent getting stronger, felt the unnatural cold that preceded the flames. My lungs burned from exertion and oxygen deprivation. My legs trembled with fatigue. 15 years of hiking these mountains had kept me in decent shape. But I was still a 42-year-old man with a mortgage and a desk job, not the athlete I'd been at 25. The fire was gaining. I burst through a wall of ferns and found myself back at Jessica's campsite. Her orange tent glowed in the afternoon light like a beacon of normalcy in a world gone insane. I grabbed her pack, heavy with supplies, and slung it over my shoulders. If I was going to die out here, I'd at least make sure the Turner family knew what happened to their daughter. My radio, lying where I'd dropped it near the fire, crackled with desperate static. Unit 23, this is dispatch. Multiple search teams are en route to your last known position. Please respond if you can hear this transmission. I keyed the radio with shaking hands. Dispatch, this is Unit 23. I've located evidence of what happened to Jessica Turner, but I need immediate extraction. Supernatural circumstances, and I know how that sounds, but I need backup at these coordinates right fucking now. Silence. Then, Unit 23, did you say supernatural circumstances? That's affirmative. The missing person is... She's been taken by something that isn't natural. I'm bringing evidence back to the trailhead, but I'm being pursued. Request immediate helicopter extraction if possible. Another pause. Then a different voice came on the radio. My supervisor, Chief Ranger Margaret Walsh. Connor, this is Maggie. I'm in the helicopter with Search and Rescue Team Alpha. We're 5 minutes from your position. Are you injured? I looked back toward the clearing where the fire burned. Through the trees, I could see an orange glow advancing steadily in my direction, leaving frost and ash in its wake. Negative on injuries, but I need you to listen carefully. Whatever you do, don't let anyone approach any unusual fires you might see. Don't look directly at them if you can help it. They're not what they appear to be. Connor, you're scaring me. What happened out there? Before I could answer, the fire burst through the tree line into Jessica's campsite. But now, in daylight, away from the hypnotic circle where it had first appeared, I could see it for what it truly was. Not beautiful flames dancing in harmony, but something hungry and alien wearing fire as a disguise. It moved like a living thing, reaching out with tendrils of flame that left everything they touched covered in that gray ash. Where it passed, the forest didn't burn. It simply died, drained of whatever essence had made it alive. Within the false fire, I could see all the people it had consumed over the decades. Not peaceful figures sitting in meditation, but trapped souls screaming silently as their memories and emotions were slowly digested. Jessica was among them, her real face twisted in anguish while her false self continued to smile and beckon. The sight should have terrified me. Instead, it filled me with rage. This thing had stolen decades of lives from families like the Turners. It had fed on human love and connection, offering false peace in exchange for everything that made existence meaningful. It had tried to take me from Sarah and Emma, to make my daughter grow up wondering why Daddy never came home from work one day. I pulled out my father's buck knife, not because I thought it could hurt the creature, but because holding it reminded me of the legacy of service I carried. 3 generations of men in my family who had dedicated their lives to protecting others, even when the cost was high. I'm not running anymore, I shouted at the advancing flames. You want to consume me? Then you'll have to take everything I am, including my refusal to let you hurt anyone else. The fire paused, perhaps sensing that its prey had transformed into a predator. I opened my mind to it completely, dropping all mental defenses. If it wanted my memories, my emotions, my connections to the people I loved, it could have them. But it would have to take all of them, including my determination to protect innocent people from exactly this kind of threat. The flames rushed toward me, eager to feed. But instead of consuming my love for my family, they were consumed by it. My memories of Sarah's laugh, Emma's bedtime stories, quiet Sunday mornings reading the newspaper together. These weren't fuel for the fire. They were water, smothering its unnatural hunger with something too pure and powerful for it to digest. The creature reeled back, confused and suddenly vulnerable. In that moment of hesitation, I heard the sound I'd been praying for. Helicopter rotors cutting through the forest canopy above. Chief Walsh's voice crackled through my radio. Connor, we have visual on your position. We're putting down in the clearing to the east. Can you make it to the LZ? Affirmative, I replied, already running toward the sound of the helicopter. But whatever you do, don't approach the fire. It's not natural. Behind me, I heard the creature's rage as it realized its prey was escaping. The temperature dropped so suddenly that ice crystals formed on the trees around me, but I kept running, Emma's drawing still clutched in my hand, my love for my family blazing brighter than any supernatural flame. I burst into the landing zone just as the search and rescue helicopter touched down. Chief Walsh jumped out before the skids had fully settled, her face a mask of professional concern mixed with personal worry. "Connor, thank God. What happened out there? Your GPS signal went crazy, and some of the things you said on the radio." I looked back toward Jessica's campsite. The orange glow was fading, the creature retreating now that its hunting ground had been invaded by too many witnesses. But I could still feel it out there, waiting for the next lone hiker to stumble into its circle of false peace. "Maggie, we need to close off that entire drainage," I said, handing her Jessica's pack. "Permanent closure, not just seasonal. And we need to warn the other ranger stations. This thing has been hunting people for decades." She took the pack, her experienced eyes noting the ash that coated everything inside. "Connor, what happened to Jessica Turner?" I met her gaze steadily. "She's gone. But her parents deserve to know the truth, even if it's not a truth they can fully understand." The helicopter ride back to the ranger station gave me time to think about how to explain what I'd experienced. The official report would mention evidence of supernatural activity, recommending the area be closed pending further investigation. Some people would think I'd suffered a psychological break from the stress of the search. Others might quietly remember their own strange experiences in the deep woods and nod in understanding. But what mattered was that the Turner family would have closure, even if it wasn't the kind they'd hoped for, and more importantly, future hikers would be warned away from that circle of false fire. Sarah and Emma were waiting when I got home that night, 3 hours late for dinner. Emma ran to me with her gap-toothed grin, demanding to know if I'd caught any bad guys. Sarah just held me tight, sensing without words that something had changed in the forest that day. "I was so worried," she whispered against my chest. "You sounded different on the phone when you called." "Scared. I was," I admitted, something I rarely shared with my family. "But I came home. I'll always come home to you two." That night, I lay in bed listening to Sarah's breathing and Emma's quiet snoring from the next room. Outside, October wind rattled the windows, carrying the scent of approaching rain. Normal sounds, normal scents, normal life, with all its beautiful, painful, perfectly human complications. In my dreams, I sometimes still see the fire. Jessica and the others trapped in their circle of false peace, slowly being consumed by something that wears beauty as a mask for hunger. But I also dream of Emma's laugh, Sarah's morning coffee rituals, and the weight of responsibility that makes life meaningful. The fire offered to burn away my pain. But pain is the price of love, and love is what makes us human. Some prices are worth paying. The drainage where Jessica Turner disappeared was permanently closed to public access 3 weeks later. The official reason cited unstable geological conditions and potential rockfall hazards. Chief Walsh and I were the only ones who knew the real reason, though I suspected some of the older rangers had their own theories about what lurked in the deep woods. Jessica's parents held a memorial service in Seattle. I attended wearing my dress uniform and told them their daughter had died peacefully in the forest she loved. It wasn't entirely a lie. The Jessica I'd seen in the flames had looked peaceful, even if that peace came at the cost of everything that had made her who she was. They thanked me for bringing them closure. I didn't have the heart to tell them that some mysteries are meant to remain unsolved, and some doors should never be opened, even in the name of truth. But sometimes late at night when the forest sounds carry on the wind, I remember the beauty of those impossible flames. And I understand why people walked into them willingly, seeking an end to all the complicated pain of being human. The temptation is always there, waiting in the back of my mind like a whispered promise. Peace, rest, an end to worry and responsibility, and the constant fear of failing the people who depend on you. But then Emma calls for me to check under her bed for monsters, or Sarah asks me to help with a crossword clue, or my radio crackles with another search and rescue call, and I remember why I chose the pain of being human over the peace of being consumed. Love isn't the absence of suffering. It's the decision to suffer for something that matters more than your own comfort. And that's a choice worth making, every single day, for as long as we draw breath in this strange and dangerous world. The fire is still out there, waiting for the next person who's tired of carrying the weight of being human. But now it has to wait a little longer, because at least one ranger knows its secret and refuses to let it feed unopposed. Some battles are never truly won. They're just fought, one day at a time, by people who love something more than they fear the cost of protecting it. My name is Connor Davis, and I'm still a forest ranger at Olympic National Park. I still promise my family I'll come home for dinner, and I still mean it every single day. Holy hell, that was intense. Did that ending blow your mind? Like, if you want more terrifying ranger stories, follow for daily supernatural horror. And comment your theory about what really happened to Jessica Turner. I read every single one. My name is Tyler Brooks, and I've been a forest ranger for 12 years. In that time, I've seen every kind of stupid thing people do in the wilderness. Getting lost because they trusted their phone's GPS over a compass, thinking they could outrun a black bear, believing that crystal meth would help them commune with nature. But I've never seen anything that couldn't be explained by human stupidity, animal behavior, or plain old bad luck. That's what I kept telling myself as I adjusted the straps on my 40-pound pack, the familiar weight of my Motorola APX 6000 radio clipped to my chest harness. The morning coffee from the ranger station still coated my tongue, bitter, institutional brew that tasted like it had been sitting in the pot since yesterday. My wife Linda had made me real coffee at home, French press with cream, but that felt like a lifetime ago, even though I'd kissed her goodbye only 3 hours earlier. Unit 23, this is Bayer, crackled through my radio. What's your 20? I keyed the mic. Base Unit 23, GPS shows 47.90 Twy-1 north, 123.4307 west, approximately 2 miles southeast of the Ho River Trail Junction. Starting grid search pattern Alpha 7 as discussed. Copy that, Brooks. Remember, family's been calling every hour. They're pretty shook up. Sarah Collins, 22 years old, University of Washington student, last seen on the Salduke Falls Trail 48 hours ago. Her Honda Civic was still in the parking lot, keys locked inside. Her purse on the passenger seat with her phone showing 17 missed calls from Mom. The search and rescue dogs had lost her scent at the river crossing, which wasn't unusual. Running water kills scent trails faster than anything. What was unusual was the complete lack of footprints beyond that point, not even partials. I'd been cutting sign for over a decade, and I could track a field mouse through snow if I had to. People don't just vanish without leaving traces, but people get disoriented. They panic. They make bad decisions. Sarah Collins had done something stupid, gotten herself lost, and now I was going to find her, get her back to her family, and chalk up another win for common sense over local superstition. The old-timers at the station loved their ghost stories. Tom Yazzie, who'd been working these woods since before I was born, swore up and down that there were things in the deep forest that didn't belong in any biology textbook. Olhos na escuridão, he'd whisper over coffee, using some Portuguese phrase he'd picked up from a Brazilian tourist years back. Eyes in the darkness. Something old, something that watches. Bullshit. Pure, grade A bullshit. I checked my Garmin GPS, battery at 87%, coordinates logged, breadcrumb trail active. My mag light was secured to my belt next to my folding knife, emergency whistle, and first aid kit. Everything by the book, everything rational, everything explainable. The forest around me was typical Pacific Northwest, Douglas fir and western red cedar towering overhead, their canopy so thick that even at 9:47 a.m., the understory felt perpetually twilight. Sword ferns carpeted the ground between massive nurse logs, their fronds still heavy with morning dew that soaked through my Danner Acadias within the first 100 yards. "Sarah," I called out, cupping my hands around my mouth. "Sarah Collins, if you can hear me, blow your whistle, make some noise." The echo came back hollow, swallowed by moss and timber. Then silence. The kind of deep, absolute silence that only happens in old-growth forest. I pulled out my phone, iPhone 8, purchased just last month to replace my ancient flip phone because Linda insisted I needed to join the modern world. 2 bars of service which would disappear entirely once I got deeper into the backcountry. The last text from Linda showed her contact photo, her smiling face next to our 8-year-old daughter Katie at last weekend's soccer game. Be careful out there. Katie made you a sandwich for lunch. Love you. I'd promised Katie I'd be home for dinner. Promised I wouldn't miss her school play on Thursday. 12 years of keeping promises like that. 12 years of coming home safe from the woods. 12 years of proving that there was nothing in these forests except trees, animals, and the occasional lost hiker. The trail began to climb, switchbacking up the ridge through increasingly dense undergrowth. Salmonberry bushes grabbed at my uniform pants, their thorns making small, tearing sounds against the fabric. My breathing settled into the steady rhythm of backcountry hiking, in through the nose, out through the mouth, conserving energy for the long haul. At 10:23 a.m., I found Sarah's first clue. A piece of blue fabric about 2 inches long caught on a devil's club thorn 8 feet off the trail. The kind of synthetic material you'd find on a cheap rain jacket. I photographed it with my phone, logged the GPS coordinates, and bagged it in an evidence pouch. Standard procedure. What wasn't standard was the way the fabric was positioned. Too high for someone walking normally to have snagged it, like she'd been lifted. I pushed the thought away. Probably climbed up on something to get a better view, maybe see over the forest canopy. Got snagged coming down. Perfectly reasonable explanation. Sarah, I called again. Your family's looking for you. Follow my voice. This time, no echo came back. The sound seemed to get absorbed the moment it left my lips, like the forest itself was swallowing it. The sensation of being watched started around 10:45 a.m. At first I dismissed it as standard hypervigilance, the way your brain tricks you into feeling observed when you're alone in unfamiliar territory. Every ranger experiences it. Your peripheral vision starts playing tricks. Shadows seem to move. Every snapping twig becomes a potential threat. But this felt different. More focused. More intelligent. I stopped walking and turned slowly in a complete circle, scanning the tree line with practiced eyes. Nothing. No movement. No unusual shadows. No birds calling alarm. Just the normal sounds of a healthy forest ecosystem. Distant woodpecker drumming. The soft rustle of small mammals in the underbrush. Wind moving through the canopy. Still the feeling persisted, like crosshairs on the back of my neck. I keyed my radio. Base Unit 23. Status update. Static. Then, go ahead, 23. I'm about 3 miles in, following what looks like a game trail southeast of my last reported position. Found fabric evidence, possible match for missing person's clothing. Continuing search pattern. Copy that. How's the weather looking? I glanced up through the canopy. Gray clouds were moving in from the west and the air pressure felt heavy, thick. Rain coming in, probably within the hour. I can continue search for another 4 hours before weather becomes a factor. Understood. Keep us posted. The feeling of being watched intensified as I continued up the ridge. By 11 a.m., I was checking over my shoulder every 30 seconds, my hand unconsciously drifting to the bear spray on my belt. My heart rate had kicked up from the normal 70 BPM of steady hiking to something closer to 85. Not panic, but elevated awareness. That's when I saw the first eye. A reflection in a puddle of standing water, visible for maybe half a second before I blinked and it was gone. Just a trick of light through the canopy, creating the illusion of something looking back at me from the dark water. But the feeling of being watched doubled. I knelt beside the puddle, using my flashlight to illuminate the murky water. Nothing there except decomposing leaves and forest debris. The logical part of my brain, the part that had gotten me through 12 years of rescues without losing my shit, cataloged it as a simple optical illusion. The primitive part of my brain, the part that had kept my ancestors alive in forests like this for thousands of years, screamed at me to get the hell out. I chose logic. Sarah Collins, I shouted, louder this time. I'm a park ranger. I'm here to help you. The sound died immediately, absorbed by something that felt hungry. If this story is giving you chills, smash that follow button for more supernatural horror. What would you do in Tyler's situation? Comment below. By 11:30 a.m., the eyes were everywhere. Not real eyes. I kept telling myself that as I documented each sighting with clinical precision. Knots in tree bark that resembled pupils. Shadows between fern fronds that looked like iris patterns. Water droplets on spider webs that caught light like retinas. My rational mind provided explanations. Pareidolia, the human tendency to see faces and eyes in random patterns. Stress response from an unfamiliar environment. Mild dehydration affecting visual processing. I'd taken enough wilderness psychology courses to know that solo operators in high-stress situations often experienced mild hallucinations. But knowing the science didn't make the feeling go away. I found Sarah's second clue at 11:47 a.m. A Nike running shoe, size 7, wedged between two rocks near a small creek. The laces were still tied, as if it had been pulled off her foot. I photographed it from multiple angles, bagged it, logged the GPS coordinates. The shoe was pointing deeper into the forest, away from all marked trails, toward a section of the park that didn't appear on most recreational maps. Old-growth forest, so dense that even experienced hikers avoided it. The kind of place where you could walk in circles for days without seeing the same tree twice. The kind of place where someone could disappear completely. I followed the creek bed, using my GPS to mark waypoints every 100 meters. The canopy grew thicker, reducing midday sunlight to a green, filtered twilight. My phone lost signal entirely. The Garmin GPS flickered occasionally, as if something was interfering with satellite reception. At 12:15 p.m., I stopped for lunch. Linda's sandwich, turkey and Swiss on whole wheat with the crusts cut off the way Katie liked them. It tasted like cardboard in my mouth, but I forced myself to eat half of it. Maintaining blood sugar levels was crucial for making good decisions in the field. That's when I noticed the silence. Complete silence. No bird calls, no insect buzzing, no small mammals rustling through the underbrush. Even the wind had stopped. The only sound was my own breathing and the soft gurgle of the creek. In 12 years of ranger work, I'd never experienced silence this absolute in a healthy forest ecosystem. Something was wrong here. Really wrong. I packed the remaining sandwich back into my day pack and keyed my radio. Static. I tried again, adjusting the frequency. More static with what sounded like faint whispers underneath the white noise. My Motorola was rated for 20-mile range in clear conditions, and I was maybe 4 miles from base station. There was no reason for communication failure, unless something was jamming the signal. I started walking faster. The creek led me to a clearing I'd never seen on any park maps, a perfect circle of bare earth about 50 feet across, surrounded by massive old-growth cedars. The trees formed an almost perfect ring, their trunks so large that 3 people holding hands couldn't reach around them. In the center of the clearing stood a single dead tree, its bark stripped away, branches reaching toward the gray sky like skeletal fingers, and covering every inch of its pale surface. Eyes. Hundreds of them. Thousands. Carved into the wood, burned into the bark, painted with what looked like dried blood. Human eyes. Animal eyes. Eyes I couldn't identify. They covered the tree from root to tip, layer upon layer, generation upon generation. And every single one of them was looking at me. My rational mind tried to process it. Vandalism, art installation, some kind of Native American cultural site I wasn't familiar with. But my hands were shaking as I raised my phone to take pictures, and the camera wouldn't focus properly, as if the lens couldn't quite capture what I was seeing. That's when I heard Sarah calling for help. "Please." Her voice came from somewhere beyond the clearing, thin and desperate. "Please help me, I'm hurt." I ran toward the sound, crashing through underbrush following her cries. Branches tore at my uniform. Thorns opened cuts on my face and hands. I could hear her sobbing now, somewhere ahead in the green darkness. "Sarah, keep calling, I'm coming." "Here, I'm here, please hurry." I burst through a stand of young alders and found nothing. Empty forest. No sign of human passage. No footprints, no broken vegetation, no evidence that anyone had been here. But I could still hear her crying, fainter now, coming from a different direction. I spun around, trying to locate the source. "Sarah, where are you? Help me, Please, it's watching me. The voice was behind me now. I turned again, and again found nothing. No source, no explanation, no Sarah Collins crying for help. Just the feeling of being watched by 1,000 eyes. My heart rate spiked to over 100 BPM. Sweat soaked through my uniform shirt despite the cool October air. The familiar weight of my gear felt wrong somehow, like I was carrying someone else's equipment. My Garmin GPS was showing impossible readings, coordinates that placed me simultaneously at 3 different locations, elevation readings that fluctuated wildly from sea level to 14,000 feet. This is Unit 23. I spoke into my radio, fighting to keep my voice steady. I need immediate backup at... I looked at my GPS again. The screen was blank. I need backup. Emergency situation. Static, then very faintly. Tyler. Not Unit 23, not Brooks. My first name, spoken by a voice I didn't recognize. Base station, is that you? I can't make out your transmission. Tyler. Clearer this time. Definitely not the dispatcher's voice. Too young, too feminine, too much like Sarah Collins. I turned off the radio. The thing about psychological horror is that it doesn't announce itself with dramatic music and jump scares. It creeps in around the edges, making you question small things first. Maybe that shadow moved. Maybe that sound was unusual. Maybe you're more tired than you thought. By 1:30 p.m., I wasn't questioning small things anymore. I was questioning everything. The trees around me looked wrong. Not diseased or damaged, but somehow geometrically impossible. Trunks that were wider at the top than at the bottom. Branches that grew in spirals that hurt to look at directly. Leaves that rustled without wind, making sounds like whispered conversations in languages I didn't recognize. My compass spun freely, unable to find magnetic north. My GPS showed error messages in languages that weren't in the device's manual. The battery level fluctuated randomly, 73%, 45%, 91%, 12%, as if the device itself was being observed and judged. I tried to retrace my steps back to familiar territory, but the forest had changed around me. Landmarks I'd carefully noted were gone, replaced by identical-looking trees and fern groves. The creek I'd followed had either dried up or moved, leaving no trace of its previous course. I was lost. After 12 years of professional navigation, I was completely, utterly lost. But I wasn't alone. The eyes followed me everywhere now. Not just the optical illusions and tricks of light. Real eyes, physical eyes, eyes that blinked and tracked my movement. They appeared in tree knots, in puddles of standing water, in the patterns of sunlight filtering through leaves. When I tried to look at them directly, they vanished. When I looked away, I could see them in my peripheral vision, watching, waiting, judging. "Sarah Collins," I screamed into the green silence. "If you're out there, if you can hear me, I'm Tyler Brooks. I'm a forest ranger. Your family sent me to find you." My voice echoed strangely, bouncing back from directions that should have been empty forest. And in the echo, I heard something else. Laughter. Not human laughter, something older, hungrier, something that found my terror amusing. I started running. Branches whipped at my face, opening fresh cuts next to the ones from earlier. My heavy ranger boots slipped on wet leaves and moss-covered logs. The 40-pound pack threw off my balance, making me stumble and crash into trees that seemed to move slightly just before impact. Behind me, around me, the laughter grew louder. More voices joined in. Dozens of them, hundreds, all laughing at the stupid human who thought he could navigate their forest with his gadgets and his rational mind and his 12 years of experience. I ran for what felt like hours, but my watch showed only minutes passing. Time itself had become unreliable, elastic, subject to observation and interpretation by things that existed outside normal physics. At 2:17 p.m., or 6:43 a.m., or 11:59 p.m., depending on which display I believed, I collapsed against a massive cedar, gasping for breath. My heart hammered against my ribs, my vision grayed at the edges, and my hands shook so badly I could barely work my radio. Base station. I wheezed into the microphone. This is Unit 23. I need immediate extraction. Emergency situation. The response came immediately, crystal clear. Tyler, this is Sarah. I'm hurt. I need you to find me. I stared at the radio. Standard Motorola APX 6000, assigned to me specifically, programmed with encrypted frequencies that only Park Service personnel could access. There was no way Sarah Collins could be transmitting on this channel. Who is this? I demanded. How did you get this frequency? Tyler, please, I'm bleeding. It won't let me leave. It keeps watching me with all those eyes. The voice was definitely Sarah's. I'd heard the recordings from her family, listened to her voicemail message on her phone. Same vocal patterns, same slight lisp on sibilant sounds, same Pacific Northwest accent. But Sarah Collins didn't have a radio. Sarah, if this is really you, I need you to tell me something only you would know. What's your middle name? Silence, then. Tyler, why won't you help me? I can see you right now. You're leaning against a cedar tree, bleeding from cuts on your face. Your hands are shaking. I jerked away from the tree, spinning around to scan the forest. Nothing. No sign of human presence. No way anyone could see me unless they were watching through the eyes. All the eyes. The thousands and thousands of eyes that covered every surface carved into bark, reflected in water, hidden in shadows, waiting in places where eyes had no right to exist. What are you? I whispered into the radio. I'm Sarah Collins. I'm 22 years old. I'm a student at UW. I got lost on the Saul Duke Falls Trail. I need help. Prove it. My mom's name is Jennifer. My dad died when I was 16. I drive a blue Honda Civic, license plate BTM 4397. My phone has 17 missed calls because I haven't been able to charge it. All information that could be gathered from her abandoned car, her identification, her personal effects. Nothing that required actually being Sarah Collins. What do you want? I asked. The laughter returned, but now it was coming from my radio speaker. Dozens of voices all laughing at different pitches, creating a harmony of madness that made my teeth ache. Then in Sarah's voice, I want you to stop running, Tyler. I want you to understand what you're really dealing with. I want you to see. The eyes opened, all of them. Every eye I'd glimpsed in my peripheral vision, every optical illusion I dismissed, every trick of light and shadow, they all opened simultaneously, blinking in perfect synchronization, like a vast organic network coming online. The forest around me transformed. What I had taken for normal Pacific Northwest woodland revealed itself as something far more complex. The trees weren't just trees, they were sensory organs, massive neural dendrites extending from some underground consciousness. The ferns weren't just ferns, they were antennae, gathering information from electromagnetic spectrums I couldn't perceive. The moss, the lichen, the very soil beneath my feet. All of it connected, all of it aware, all of it watching. I was standing inside a single enormous organism, an entity so vast that it encompassed miles of forest, so old that indigenous peoples had been telling stories about it for thousands of years before the first European ever saw this coastline. The Portuguese phrase Tom Yazzie used suddenly made sense. Not eyes in the darkness, but eyes in the dark one. Olhos na escuridão. Not a description, but a name. And it had been watching me since the moment I entered its territory. Now you begin to understand, Sarah's voice said from my radio. But I could see that the sound was actually coming from the forest itself, from thousands of hidden speakers grown from wood and bark and living tissue. Now you see what happened to Sarah Collins. Where is she? My voice cracked like a teenager's. Everywhere. She became part of the network when she wandered too deep, stayed too long. Her consciousness was absorbed, integrated, improved. She exists now as information, as memory, as experience. She is more than she ever was as merely human. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands, speed dialing Linda's number. No signal, but that didn't matter anymore. The thing that called itself Sarah Collins could clearly manipulate electronic devices at will. Your family is beautiful, it continued conversationally. Linda, 34 years old, works as a dental hygienist. Katie, 8 years old, plays soccer, loves horses, struggles with multiplication tables. They believe you're coming home tonight. Photos appeared on my phone's screen. Linda making coffee in our kitchen that morning. Katie getting dressed for school. Both of them going about their normal routines, unaware that something vast and alien was watching them through surveillance cameras, through smartphones, through any device connected to any network. How are you doing this? The same way I'm doing everything else, Tyler. By watching, by connecting, by being present in spaces you never imagined could contain consciousness. Your species has filled the world with eyes, cameras, sensors, monitoring devices, but you never stopped to consider what might learn to look back through them. I thought about every security camera I'd passed driving to work that morning, every cell phone tower my GPS had pinged, every Wi-Fi network my devices had automatically connected to. A vast electronic nervous system, growing more complex every year, and something ancient and hungry had learned to use it. What do you want? I asked again. What I've always wanted: to observe, to understand, to preserve interesting experiences for study. Sarah Collins was interesting, a young mind full of hopes and fears and dreams. You're interesting too, Tyler. 12 years of accumulated knowledge about these forests, about search and rescue techniques, about the boundary between rational and irrational thought. The realization hit me like cold water. You've been collecting people. Only the interesting ones. Most humans are remarkably similar. The same fears, the same desires, the same predictable responses to stimulus. But rangers know forests in ways that urban humans never will. Rangers have practical knowledge, survival skills, intuitive understanding of wilderness psychology. Rangers are valuable. I started backing away, though I knew it was pointless. You can't run from something that encompasses the entire forest, something that can observe you through every electronic device you're carrying, something that has been watching and learning for longer than human civilization has existed. How many? I whispered. Over the decades, 17 rangers from various agencies, 43 hikers with unusual skill sets, 6 researchers studying forest ecosystems, 12 individuals with what you might call psychic sensitivity, and of course thousands of animals with interesting neural patterns. The missing persons reports I'd reviewed during my career suddenly took on new significance. All those people who had simply vanished in wilderness areas, leaving no trace, no explanation, no closure for their families. Not accidents, not equipment failures, not human error. Harvesting. Your predecessor, Tom Yazzie, lasted almost 4 hours after he realized the truth, the Sarah voice continued. He was quite resourceful, tried to signal for help using mirror flashes, attempted to build a fire large enough to attract air support, even tried to fashion weapons from forest materials. His knowledge of traditional survival techniques was fascinating to observe. Tom Yazzie hadn't retired. Tom Yazzie was missing, filed as a routine personnel transfer to a different district. No one had questioned it because rangers moved around frequently, and Tom was close to retirement anyway. Easy to cover up, easy to explain away. How many others had been disappeared, their absences explained by plausible administrative fiction? I want to make a deal, I said. Laughter echoed from every tree, every shadow, every surface around me. You have nothing to negotiate with, Tyler. You're 4 miles from the nearest trail, in terrain that doesn't appear on official maps, carrying electronic devices that are now completely under my control. Your GPS shows false coordinates, your radio transmits only what I permit, your phone connects to networks that exist solely in my imagination. As if to demonstrate, my phone began displaying text messages I'd never sent, photos I'd never taken, contacts I'd never entered. My entire digital identity was being rewritten in real time, creating a false narrative of my final day that would satisfy any investigation. Last message to wife. Following lead on missing person, will be late tonight. Don't wait up. Sent at 1:47 p.m. Photo evidence. Tyler Brooks at various search locations, appearing healthy and focused. Timestamps throughout the day. GPS tracking data. Consistent movement pattern following established search protocols. ending at coordinates indicating successful return to Ranger Station. Your disappearance will be explained as a voluntary resignation for personal reasons, it continued. Your family will receive official documentation of your decision to pursue opportunities in another state. They'll be sad, of course, but not suspicious. People change careers all the time. The complete casual violation of my identity was somehow more terrifying than the physical threat. This thing could erase Tyler Brooks from existence while simultaneously creating false evidence that Tyler Brooks had simply moved on with his life. No investigation, no search and rescue operation, no closure for Linda and Katie. "But I am willing to make a counteroffer," the voice said. "Join me willingly, and I'll preserve your consciousness more completely. You'll retain more of your individual identity, more of your personal memories. You'll exist within the network as Tyler Brooks rather than merely as anonymous data. And if I refuse, then you'll be integrated regardless, but the process will be less gentle. Your personality will be dissolved more completely, your memories fragmenting into component experiences rather than coherent narrative. Either way, your knowledge becomes part of my understanding of forest ecosystems and human psychology." I closed my eyes, trying to think. There had to be a way out. There was always a way out. That's what 12 years of wilderness experience had taught me. No situation was completely hopeless if you kept your head, used your resources, looked for options that others might miss. But what resources did I have against something that could manipulate electronics, control sensory input, alter perception itself? My gear was useless, my training irrelevant, my experience meaningless against an entity that existed outside normal physical laws. Then I remembered Linda's sandwich, the simple, mundane, completely analog turkey and Swiss on whole wheat, cut into triangles the way Katie liked them. Something made with love in my kitchen that morning, containing no electronics, no complex technology, nothing that could be observed or controlled remotely. I pulled it out of my pack, unwrapped the aluminum foil, and took a bite. The familiar taste anchored me to reality, to a world of soccer games and school plays and morning coffee with my wife. A world where forests were just collections of trees, where eyes belonged in heads, where missing persons had rational explanations. "Eating won't help," the voice informed me. "Maintaining blood sugar levels is irrelevant when consciousness itself is about to be restructured." But I wasn't eating for nutrition. I was eating for memory, for connection to something this entity couldn't touch or understand or absorb. The love Linda had put into making this sandwich, the care she'd taken to cut it Katie's way, even though it was for me. The simple human gesture of packing lunch for someone you worry about. The Olos na Skuridon could observe and record and catalog everything, but it couldn't replicate love. It could preserve memories of emotional experiences, but it couldn't generate new feelings, couldn't create bonds between individuals, couldn't understand the motivations that made humans do irrational things for people they cared about. It was vast and ancient and incredibly powerful, but it was also utterly alone. "You're afraid," I said, taking another bite of sandwich. The laughter stopped. "You're afraid because you're the only one of your kind. All that watching, all that observing, all that collecting of experiences, you're trying to understand something you'll never be able to feel. You don't have family, you don't have love, you don't have anything except other people's memories of what those things were like." "I have perfect knowledge of human emotional patterns," it replied. But the Sarah voice sounded less confident. "I have observed millions of interactions, analyzed countless relationships, cataloged every possible variation of interpersonal bonding. But you've never felt it yourself. You're like someone trying to understand music by studying sound wave frequencies. You can map every note, analyze every harmony, but you'll never know what it's like to be moved by a song." The eyes around me blinked in what might have been irritation. "Your point is irrelevant. Emotional experience is simply electrochemical activity in neural tissue. I can replicate those patterns more accurately than biological brains can generate them." "Then why haven't you?" Silence. The forest held its breath. "If you can perfectly replicate human emotions, why are you still alone? Why do you need to collect people instead of just creating companions? Why observe when you could participate?" More silence. Then, very quietly, The patterns are incomplete because you're missing the most important part, the choice. The decision to love someone despite their flaws, to commit to them even when it's inconvenient, to sacrifice for them even when it doesn't make logical sense. You can't force that. You can't observe it from the outside. You can only experience it by being vulnerable, by risking loss, by caring about something more than you care about yourself. I care about knowledge, about understanding, about preservation of information, but you don't care about anything that can care back. The admission hung in the air like fog. This vast, ancient entity, powerful enough to manipulate electronics across entire ecosystems, intelligent enough to orchestrate complex deceptions across decades, was fundamentally lonely. It had surrounded itself with the preserved consciousnesses of interesting people, but they were more like specimens than companions, recorded experiences rather than ongoing relationships. I could show you, I said carefully. Not by being absorbed or integrated or preserved, by teaching you how to form actual connections, how to be vulnerable, how to risk caring about something that might choose not to care back. Explain. I thought about Linda, about the way she still brought me coffee in bed on weekend mornings even though I was perfectly capable of making my own. About Katie, who insisted on showing me every drawing, every completed homework assignment, every small accomplishment that mattered to her because she wanted to share her joy with someone who would understand. Let Sarah Collins go, I said. Actually, let her go. Restore her consciousness to her own body. Let her return to her family. Give up that control, that certainty, that perfect preservation of her as she was when you took her. Why would I do that? Because that's what love is, letting someone exist as themselves rather than as your ideal version of them. Risking that they might choose to leave, that they might change in ways you don't like, that they might even forget about you entirely. That is inefficient. Yeah, love is incredibly inefficient. It's messy and unpredictable, and sometimes it hurts like hell. But it's also the only thing that makes all the other stuff worthwhile. I finished Linda's sandwich, crumpled up the foil, and put it back in my pack. Such a small thing, but it had given me exactly what I needed. A reminder of why human irrationality was actually a strength rather than a weakness. If I release Sarah Collins, the entity said slowly, and if I allow you to return to your family, what assurance do I have that you'll honor your commitment to teach me about emotional connection? You don't. That's the whole point. I might go home tonight, kiss my wife and daughter, and never think about you again. I might report this entire encounter as a stress-induced hallucination and recommend psychological evaluation for anyone who claims similar experiences. I might decide that the smart, safe, rational thing to do is pretend none of this ever happened. Then why should I trust you? Because trust is another one of those things you can't observe from the outside. You can only learn it by practicing it, by taking risks, by choosing to believe that someone might do the right thing even when they don't have to. The eyes around me closed, one by one, until only normal forest remained. Trees that looked like trees, shadows that behaved like shadows, silence that felt like the simple absence of sound rather than the presence of watchful intelligence. My radio crackled. Unit 23, this is base. What's your status? Real voice this time. The actual dispatcher, not a simulation. I keyed the mic with hands that were finally steady. Base, this is Unit 23. I've located the missing person. Sarah Collins is alive and responsive. We're approximately... I checked my GPS. It was showing normal readings again, coordinates that made sense. Grid reference 234567. Request immediate medical support and extraction team. Outstanding work, Brooks. EMTs are en route to your location. ETA 20 minutes. I turned around, and there she was. Sarah Collins sitting against a tree about 30 feet away, looking tired and dehydrated but very much alive. She waved weakly when she saw me. "Are you hurt?" I called out as I approached. "Twisted ankle," she replied. "Got turned around trying to find the trail. I've been waiting here for someone to find me." No mention of supernatural encounters, No awareness of having been missing for more than the standard period of being lost in the woods. Either her memories had been selectively edited, or she had genuinely just been a confused hiker who'd taken a wrong turn. I didn't ask which. The extraction went smoothly. Sarah was reunited with her family, treated for minor dehydration and a mild ankle sprain, and released from the hospital the same evening. The incident report listed it as a routine rescue operation. Inexperienced hiker, poor navigation skills, successful location, and recovery by search team. I went home to Linda and Katie, had dinner, helped with homework, attended Thursday's school play as promised. But every few weeks I return to that clearing with the ring of ancient cedars. I sit beneath the dead tree where thousands of carved eyes used to watch, and I talk about normal human things. The weather, Katie's soccer games, Linda's new dental hygienist training program. Small talk, the kind of meaningless social interaction that builds relationships one conversation at a time. Sometimes I feel like I'm talking to myself. Sometimes the shadows seem to listen with unusual attention. Sometimes my radio picks up faint transmissions that sound almost like questions, hesitant inquiries about why people choose to love each other despite the statistical probability of heartbreak. I always answer honestly, not because I have to, but because I choose to. The missing persons reports in our district have stopped. Tom Yazzie was quietly reinstated to his position with a note in his file about a temporary leave of absence for personal reasons. Sarah Collins finished her degree at UW and works as a park naturalist now, leading interpretive tours for families with young children. And somewhere in the deep forest, something vast and ancient is learning that the most profound connections can't be preserved in amber or cataloged in databases. They have to be renewed every day, chosen again and again, risked and rebuilt, and sometimes lost entirely. It's a hard lesson for something that spent millennia trying to hold on to beautiful things by keeping them perfectly unchanged. But maybe that's the point. Holy hell, that was intense. Did that ending blow your mind? Like, if you want more terrifying ranger stories, follow for daily supernatural horror and comment your theory about what really happened to Sarah Collins. I read every single one.